Hi, Denny again, and we're about to comb through the experience of the iris one more time. And this is a basic discussion on iris duality. Now I must confess, there's probably really nothing at all basic about the iris. But this is an introductory experience for those who are coming along to learn the iris for the first time. But for those of you who are, well, far more experienced, you're going to find there's some new things that you're going to learn, because I've also learned myself something new about the iris. One of my ways of being able to experience this is how to experience the feeling of these individual types of irises. Now I've given you three variations of the expansive. We're calling it yang. Now this is not to say that we're incorporating the system of yang and yin according to how it is commonly known. Our way of describing some of the elements of yang will be different than the other systems that describe yang and yin. But our way of describing this is an expansive flow in the iris, which is exemplified by these open webs in the eye, is primarily an expansive or yang. The other side, these dot-like patterns, sometimes there are just a few of them, you have to look quite close. This is fairly extreme about the constrictive or yin. This is fairly extreme about the expansive or yang. And these are varying degrees of it. One of my personal ways of doing this is to feel it. A question from the audience, yes?
I have a question when you say constrictive and expansive, because in my mind I think of expansive being a positive quality and constrictive being a negative quality. So can you explain constrictive a little bit more clearly? What that really means energetically, and is it a positive or is it a negative constriction?
My way of looking at any iris constitution is always positive. There are, if you will, there are defining attributes both that are positive, and there are characteristics. Both of them can have negative attributes, like the expansive one can be aggressively emotional and angry. The constrictive or the yin one can be excessively analytical or controlling. But the beauty of this one is, if you can imagine, how long does it take really to make a diamond? How much constriction, how much compression, how much clarity, how much quality of the seeking. So for me, this one is a piercing, looking inward, looking deeper, forever and eternally becoming more aware. So this is an awareness type. This is an expansive feeling type, which can be feeling and also connective, but this is a circulating flow.
But the flower type can also be seeking, but it's an outward seeking, whereas the jewel is an inward seeking?
Yes.
Okay.
They're both seekers in different ways.
Okay, great.
Now, if you can think of the constrictive line being a vertical in some way, because it is like a masculine principle of being sharp and upward. So this is an expansive quality versus the opposite function, which is more of a horizontal or a magnetic quality. So this opens and this one directs.
Okay.
So there's two different qualities to how this works. The yin, it has its own form of constriction and expansion, and yang has its own form of constriction and expansion, but we'll go into that at another time. So one of my ways of experiencing this is to imagine life force flowing through me, but the pattern of the life force, if you might imagine, and I do this myself many times, if this is a nozzle on a hose, what's going to be the spray pattern? The spray pattern is going to be effuse. It's going to be spraying out like a fountain in some way. The spray pattern on this is going to be like a drilling little nozzle that has high pressure. Even though it's using the same magnitude of water, the same rate of flow, its display is different. So literally sometimes this is about how to have a feeling experience of the eye, not just an intellectual experience of the iris. So this one is, how do I learn to have a soft flow in one type versus a dynamic flow of yang on another type? So there's a wide range, not only of types of structures and degree of it. This is also to show you that there's not really a difference in the color of the eye and whether they are yang or yin. You can be a brown-eyed jewel or you can be a blue-eyed jewel. So the colors don't really matter. Later there'll be some interpretation about the gathering of color or the absence of color or the significance of pigment. These are other more advanced talks about the nature of the iris and duality. So this is just to get a broad range of appreciation. This is like how to increase the depth and magnitude and the range of my appreciation of souls. So this is like 3 different souls that are flowers, but they're also fingerprints, so each one is totally and completely unique. And how can I feel this one that's different than this one? And there's absolutely no qualitative difference because one has a different type of attribute of the way they express it. Because the life force flowing through this one is the identical life force flowing through this one, but it's expressed differently. So how do I put myself in the place of doing this when some people find this side to be annoying? Well, this just means that you're rational and thinking and alert and your mind's busy and you don't feel. This one has a use of the life force to discover, to realize, to uncover, to know, to gain clarity. There's a whole series of adjectives. One of my favorite is this one has a tendency to want to know the facts or the truth about something. So there's a whole range of these. So this is a fingerprint, but what if you had 30,000 of this one? How would you be able to relate to all 30,000 in a completely unique way? And 30,000 of these on this side, and they all have varying degrees of color and shape and magnitude. How can I actually feel all 30,000 of this and 30,000 of this one and see them as equally beautiful? The difficulty in some of the other uses of the iris and iridology is this one is sometimes called, oh, this is bad, this is no, this is dirt, this is drugs, this is antibiotics, this is damaged. Oh, look at this one, how damaged that one is. And in this system there is no damaged iris. We all have emotional damage, but these are also reflections of qualities of the soul, attributes of the soul, how to experience and feel and occupy greater and greater magnitudes of this one, greater and greater magnitudes of this one. This is the nature of the iris duality. So when I'm looking at an iris, I like to consider this the examination of the self. Now this word self is reasonably safe. I'm saying reasonably self because this self can be true self, higher self. This is, what is the nature of the self? How is myself in the world as a distinct individual? How does the iris reflect my individuality? How does it have a different way over here? So this is about the experience of the self. Later we begin to expand this experience of self because we go into existence. I exist. Then I go into the questions about what am I? How do I know more about myself? Then we start bringing in some umbrellas of definition of self. Well, I'm a spirit, I'm a soul, I'm an energy, I'm a spark of something, I'm the all, I'm God, I'm nothing. So all of these definitions of the self come later. But for me, the first thing before we even go into the other theological or esoteric explanations of the iris, we're talking about becoming more responsible for your own iris pattern of yourself. So how to be yourself as it exists now by objectively being able to look at perhaps the most energetically sensitive part of the body, the iris, as the window to the soul. So my definition of the self is the soul, your definition might be the spirit, the alma, whatever else you want to call it, by some other words, doesn't matter. So this is what it's about, iris duality and the discovery of and the learned experience about the self. And we're going to go into much more of what the iris patterns look like, how to use that, but then we get into the iris patterns relative to the left and right eye, because it will show a different constitution in the right eye, another constitution in the left eye, and then we start looking at the duality on a lateral way, which is basically related to the patterns acquired from the mother and the father. What are the influences on this pattern relative to the experiences of mother and father? So this is a basic way that we look at the iris. For me, it's a genuinely beautiful, enthusiastic experience. And the reason it's that way is because I know that there is a continually increasing sensitivity, because if I'm more willing to have the desire to know this part of the soul, and I experience it with greater feeling, then I can experience this one even more of myself. Because I have all of this inside of me, somewhere. I have all of this inside of me, somewhere. So how do I increase my feeling experience of awareness and my feeling experiences of emotion? How do I occupy all of this as myself? So the iris is a study of the self. I used to call it the true self or the higher self, but I don't know that it's any higher than lower than anything else. It's not really related to subconscious or higher conscious. It's just essentially the self, in however way that it is expressed or felt. So this is how to help to know myself, but this is also to look at myself objectively. And for example, I'm just going to pick a picture off the floor because that's sometimes my filing system. Now I might take this iris pattern of myself, which sometimes you can do with your own cell phone camera, you can do a selfie of your eye or your kids, and you start to make a comparison. Where does it fit in the map? This one is more objectively on the jewel side, so my objective view of myself is more about the experience. This is more about me. Whereas if I might have, thank you, a different iris, and I look around and I go, doesn't look like these, it looks a bit more like these, and I can see which side of the duality do I occupy, and then what are the actual more positive qualities of this side, because I'm one of these. And if I am, well, myself is one of these, then what responsibility do I have to be responsible for how I express this? Can I express this pattern in a loving way, or can I express this in an unloving way? Can I look at how I relate to other people using this constitution or the other constitutions? So that's what we do with an iris understanding of the constitutional pattern. Later, John and I might have a discussion about iris anatomy, how it is really a vascular system. We might even talk about the pupil and the dilation. And one of the more important discussions we're going to have later is about the formation of the iris in the first 3 months of gestation, and how the iris is mostly formed by birth, and then more is added by the age of 7, and so on. We'll talk about how this forms, how to be able to use it, how to be able to appreciate it, and whatever my current comprehension is now of any one of these structures, the ideal experience is tomorrow my feeling and awareness of it increases, and the next day, and the next day, and the next, to increase forever my feeling of this side, that side, and relating it all to my own experience of myself. Then knowing that, how do I begin to relate to other people? The primary first step to relate to other people is examining my iris related to my mother and my father, because they represent the duality that brought my self of iris structure into the material body through conception. So that goes from self, knowing myself in opposites, to the self, knowing my relationship to myself through my parents, and then their parents, and now we begin to build a map that we sometimes relate to as the dynamics of the family tree, and eventually the birth order. This is where the work goes. So those of you who would like to ask a question, you can email a question into RAID.com, or you can go to RAID on the Facebook group, RAID International Facebook group, post a question. Sometimes we can't get to every question, but we'll do our best to answer anyone's question who really wants to know more about this. So all of you know, most of you know, I'm not an iridologist, so I don't claim this to be a system of iridology. This for me is more about the discovery of the self and the soul. So that's where it leads to. So if there are questions before we close on this part of the section, we can entertain those now. Otherwise, this is just another introduction on duality. Won't end here. Come on back later, we'll do another one. Thanks for coming.